Look, I know a lot of the focus is on the new exotics, and for good reason. They are looking to be very potent inside of Renegades. We've talked about the lightsaber, we've talked about the machine gun, we've played with the crossbow, all with the exotic catalyst unlocked. But there was one weapon that really stood out to me during my time at Bungie. That is the Bitter End. This is a 900 round per minute arc heavy machine gun, and it will be dropping from the new Equilibrium dungeon on December the 13th. So we're not gonna get this weapon right out the gate. The weapon is 100% worth the wait. You can already tell, guys, this essentially is a legendary sweep business. Not only that, it's also a heat weapon, which is the new archetype of weapons that is dropping in Renegades. The reason why I really like this weapon is because with the right combination, you can consistently blow your load. So let me just say, as a Titan main, I can ask for nothing more. And the beautiful thing is you don't even have to rely on Actium War Ray. Now let me talk about the archetype of the weapon itself. Bitter End is specifically placed in an archetype called Balance Heat, which states that it's very low heat generated. Press reload to vent heat from the weapon. Overheating forces a sustained vent. Manually venting at very high heat greatly increases venting speed. Now, for those that are unfamiliar with how these weapons work, the venting reload looks very similar to how third iteration and its reload works. Or if you played any of the Star Wars Battlefront games, think things like the blasters. The difference here, though, between third iteration and our actual heat weapons is that we have an ammo count for third iteration. But notice we don't have that for our intrinsic heat weapons. How these work is that shooting your weapon generates heat, and instead of reloading, you'll need to vent the weapon to cool it off. You can see on our ammo bar that instead of shots, we have a percentage, which is basically the indicator that lets us know when we're going to overheat the weapon. Now, this is where the last part of the intrinsic description comes in. You can see on the ammo bar that there's a rectangular area at the end of it. This is considered the sweet spot. And if you vent the weapon while within that section, you'll be able to greatly increase your venting speed, which is a really cool way to be reloading. But a great benefit to this, especially here on Bitter End, is the fact that you're not shooting the weapon, it cools itself. This basically means that all heat weapons have auto-loading capabilities. Granted, it's cooled over time, so it's a little different, but you get where I'm going with this, guys. When it comes to the stats here on Bitter End, though, it sits pretty comfortably in its 900 round per minute category. Taking a look at one of our favorite 900 round per minute machine guns, that being Retrofit Escapade, which at one time was a DPS powerhouse inside of Destiny, you could see just how great Bitter End stats look in comparison. But stats or whatever, it's really about the perks. We talked about this in our overview video, but I just had to circle back to this one, guys. I spent a lot of time with it, and it's because of these trait combinations. Granted, there are things that could change from now until release, as this was a pre-capture event, but I would be very surprised if Bungie changed up any of these perks. In our third column, though, we have Cooling Baubles, Eddy Current, Hipfire Grip, Attrition Orbs, Trickle Charge, Delicate Tuning, and Gutshot Straight. In our fourth column, we have Frenzy, Offhand Strike, Jolting Feedback, Thermal Atomization, One for All, Rolling Storm, and Killing Talent. Now I'm gonna go over those new perks in the third column. Let's start with Cooling Baubles. This is a new heat-related perk coming in Renegades, and it states that collecting elemental pickups or an orb of power reduces heat. Now there's a lot of ways you can lean into that, guys. Whether it's the orbs themselves, but also many of our subclass synergies that constitutes as elemental pickups will contribute to this. But the perk I landed on and played with the most was Trickle Charge. Another new one dropping in Renegades, and this one isn't even actually tied to heat weapons, but tied to arc weapons. The perk reads, receiving or discharging a bolt charge partially loads the magazine from reserves. I use this one pretty much the entire time I use Bitter End. Considering we have artifact mods like Dielectric making a return, if you're a Storm's Keep Titan, fellas, we're about to be crutching bolt charge for yet another season, which is heresy all over again. You can see right here in this clip when standing behind our barricade and dealing damage to this Thresher, our heat meter never goes higher than 8%. I think you understand where I'm going with this, guys. You're able to sit there and blow thy load for seemingly forever with Trickle Charge as long as you are leaning into Bolt Charge, which is so easy to do with Storm's Keep. This perk is so good that I don't even want to consider anything else. I know we got Delicate Tuning, which improves range and handling and accuracy while at low heat, more of a PvP thing. But once you go Trickle Charge, guys, I don't think you're going to use anything else in that third column. You can consider Cooling Baubles, Eddy Current, or even Attrition Orbs, but Trickle Charge is just that good. Now this takes us to our fourth column perks. The only new perk perk here is thermal atomization, which states that while at high heat, this weapon deals increased damage and causes targets to explode when defeated. Now, that kind of goes against what Trickle Charge is doing. Not saying we can't make it work, but we have a lot of other great options. You've got jolting feedback in that fourth column, Frenzy, One for All, Rolling Storm, and Killing Tally. And Killing Tally may actually be the way to go because you can easily keep that damage buff and never lose it, at least until you stow the weapon. And this is also really good with things like Hazardous Propulsion. Hell, our solo flawless run of Sunder Doctrine, we were leaning heavily into Hazardous Propulsion and just discharging as much bolt charge as we possibly can. Something which is going to be very easy, if not the easiest, with Bitter End. Now, this takes us to the origin traits found on these weapons. Again, this weapon drops from the Equilibrium dungeon, and the origin trait on these weapons is called Imperial Allegiance. It states that being near allies grants further increased cooling or charge rates and increases damage while at high heat or low guard energy. Again, I almost wish there was a way we could potentially get up to high heat, but then just hold it, right? Like keep it up there. Like if the damage buff is super noticeable, maybe we can sustain that level of heat, but somehow still fit Trickle Charge into the equation. I don't know if that's going to be possible. Again, we're going to have to do some testing. Now, normally we don't talk in crazy detail about magazines, but in the case of Bitter End here, we kind of have to. We have a whole slew of new mag perks that are unique to these heat weapons. Mine is a couple ones we've seen before on different weapon types. First up, we have Light Heat Sink, which states that it's a lightweight, agile battery. Increases handling and vent speed. We also have Tactical Heat Sink and another option, which says that this weapon has multiple small improvements, slightly improves stability, vent speed, and range. Overclocked Heat Sink, which states that it slightly increases damage in exchange for reduced cooling. Enhanced Heat Sink, which says that it has a strong battery life, and it also states that it reduces heat generation. We've got Ionized Heat Sink, which states that it's a large, heavy battery, but it increases the time it takes to vent in exchange for greatly reduced heat generation. Now, I'm sure you see some of the parallels between these magazine perks and what you would find on things like a fusion rifle, which actually brings us to two more batteries, which you have definitely seen on fusions. One being Particle Repeater, which says that it improves stability, which therefore grants us that increased stability stat. The other being Projection Fuse, which increases our range. Now, some of these I could not see like the enhanced version of these perks as we were just cycling through everything, but I do plan on us testing everything here when we finally narrow down what is the 5 out of 5 God roll. Now, in terms of synergies though on this weapon, we have a lot that we can work with, which takes us to our artifact mods. I'm going to start with our column 2 mod, Impact, Shock, and Gravity. This mod states that it grants access to helmet mods, Kinetic, Void Siphon, and Kinetic and Arc Siphon, essentially just comboing these mods together. Then we have Gravatic Voltaic Charge. It says that while you have an Arc or Void Super equipped, it increases the maximum number of stacks of armor charge that you can carry by 1. Pretty self-explanatory here, guys, but frees up the necessity for some charge up mods. Then we have Elemental Siphon, which says that rapid final blows with kinetic weapons or weapons matching our equipped super creates an elemental pickup that matches your equipped super. So for Bitter End, if we're rocking an Arc Super, this is going to create Onic Traces, which do keep in mind also benefits us in our neutral game as it gives us plus 15% to our grenade, melee, and class ability on pickup. You can also take advantage of cooling baubles because of this artifact mod. But this takes us to column 4. Dielectric is making a return, a top tier mod back inside of Heresy. Defeating Arc debuff targets grants Bolt Charge. Rapidly defeating Arc debuff targets spawns an orb of power and heals a small portion of your health. Now, you may have noticed the difference between this version of Dielectric versus the one we had back in Heresy. You see, in order to actually get that second part of the artifact perk, inside of Heresy, you actually had to boost it with Tome of Wants. But in this version, it's just all packaged together. Now, in terms of how this one works, on an Arc debuff enemy kill, you would be granted 1 stack of Bolt Charge. Then after killing 3 Arc debuffed enemies, you would receive that Orb of Power along with restoring 40 HP. Hence the ability to literally just stand behind your barricade and blow thy load with Storm's Keep. But this takes us to our last column perk, and that is Elemental Orbs Arc. This mod says that Arc weapon final blows have a chance to spawn an Arc Elemental Orb. Arc Orbs can be thrown or shot to create an Arc explosion that jolts targets that it damages. You've probably seen a similar version of this, guys, with our Strand subclass and the ability to shoot your tangles and do a ton of damage, which, by the way, this works inside of PvP. Yes, you can essentially get one-hit kills inside of PvP, which is exactly why I was using a Strand weapon with that 1% build when we were trying to go for that high score in Call to Arms. I think this version is going to be even better because the jolt application isn't just one and done. You'll be able to spread that damage out even even further. And then you have the counter champion abilities from Jolt itself. Now, in terms of the exotics that we're going to be pairing here, of course, we're going to try this with Actium Warrig. I actually want to see how this is going to synergize together. But to be quite honest with you guys, I don't think I'm going to use it. Hazardous Propulsion is probably going to be the exotic of choice, which is essentially Heresy all over again. You see, Hazardous Propulsion states that weapon precision hits or final blows has a chance to load a kinetic Exodus micro missile. And when you activate your class ability, it fires those loaded Exodus micro missiles. The main takeaway for this, guys, is this combination with Storm's Keep and Hazardous Propulsion with Bitter End is going to have lots of back-to-back procs for Hazardous Propulsion, which is exactly why I have a high class, high weapon stat roll for Hazardous. I think that is going to be the synergy alongside our artifact mods that's going to make Bitter End a monster. I cannot wait to actually get my hands on this weapon, guys. We'll be testing its damage against everything else across the board. I know there are Thunderlord, Actium Warrig users right now that are saying, Cross, you'll never get me to leave. But something tells me Bitter End is going to put out. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.